Tonight on Mississippi Insight, the new first family and their first TV interview. My conversation with Governor Tate Reeves and First Lady Elee. Hello and welcome to Mississippi Insight. I'm Byron Brown. Thank you for joining us. It's Elee Reeves' first ever TV interview. We covered a number of topics from raising a family in the public eye, how they met, and what they both want to accomplish in the next 4 years. Well, how's the move going now that you've been less than 3 weeks as the new governor of Mississippi?
Well, it's going well. It's very, very busy. We inherited many challenges, which we anticipated, and we've gone to work very, very hard to start addressing some of those challenges and putting together our team. We feel very good about the level of talent that we've put together in the governor's office, and now we're working to fill state agencies.
Elee, you're still unpacking here at the mansion. Walk us through the process and what you're trying to do to get settled in with your family.
Well, we've been painting, and so we just kind of finished painting a lot of the rooms and the family kind of apartment, and we've been boxing up stuff at home. And one thing Maddie's real worried about is if there's going to be enough room for the American Girl dolls and the Barbies and all of her stuff. So we're still in the process. We're not here yet, but hopeful soon.
Now that you are the face of the state, how are you going to make that comfortable for the kids and have them live somewhat of a normal life?
Well, I will tell you that we're very blessed that my 3 daughters take after their mama, and so they're very grounded and very calm and very mature for their ages. They have the advantage of my first daughter was born in December of '04, which was a full 11 months after I initially took office as state treasurer. And so really this is all that they've ever known, is having a dad that was involved in politics and having a mom that works full time but also prioritizes them and prioritizes their events. But I will tell you, it's going to be challenging. It's been a long time since we've gone numerous years with having kids that live in the governor's mansion in our state. And so, and obviously we'll just have to play it by ear. But fortunately, our girls are pretty game. They kind of see it as an adventure. And so as long as we can get Maddie's American Girl dolls here, I think we'll be okay.
What was the kind of behind the scenes that you would say to him to say, hey, Tate, you got this? Any of that kind of conversations going on?
I mean, I'm sure we did, and now it's all a blur. Mainly, I felt like all we talked about was, hey, who's going to pick up so-and-so at basketball? Who's going to pick up so-and-so at soccer? But, yeah. Well,
yeah, and, you know, when we tried hard when we had a few moments together and a few moments with the kids to try to enlighten them on what's going on and keep them in the loop. I mean, that's one of the reasons I think our kids are relatively mature for their age, is that we treat them as if they're adults, and we're one big happy family, and we work really closely together. And as I think back through the campaign, again, this wasn't our first rodeo. We knew that there would be challenges along the way. I knew that I had a great team behind me. I had a great staff on the campaign team. I had great political advisors, and they had been in tough races across the country. And look, Byron, let's be honest. If you look at my pedigree and you look at the fact that I had been in public office for a number of years, I had been someone who worked very hard as lieutenant governor to do the right things, to pass conservative legislation. Look, reality is that I am the 65th governor of Mississippi. I was the 32nd lieutenant governor. I am the 12th person to serve as both lieutenant governor and governor in our state, but the very first that's ever served 2 full terms as lieutenant governor that was then elected governor. There's a reason for that. Lieutenant governor is a hard job, and you make a lot of decisions, and with that goes creating a lot of people who are upset with some of those decisions. There's an old saying in politics that goes something like this: friends may come and friends may go in politics, but enemies accumulate. And I made a lot of tough decisions doing what I thought was right for Mississippi, and so it really was, while I never viewed us as being in risk of losing the election, I'm fully aware, because I've seen friend after friend run over the last 4 or 5 years, that serving in public office right now in this part of the election cycle is not always the biggest attribute that you can have when running for governor, but the grassroots organization we had, the people we had, really drove us. And many, many days came where I went north and Elee went south. And so, you know, we had a good team putting us in the right positions to talk to as many voters as we could. And as we look back on it, we maybe didn't feel this way at the time, but as we look back on it, it was really a fun experience getting to meet literally thousands and thousands of Mississippians.
What are your projects going to be as First Lady, or what's your platform? Have you decided what you're going to?
I don't have a platform or a project yet, but I volunteer a lot in the community. I serve on a lot of boards. There are a zillion things that are very near and dear to my heart that I would like to help further. Of course, I would like to focus on children. But, you know, and I know Mississippi as a whole has so many tons of great causes. And so I just look forward to figuring out a way that I can jump on board into all of those as well.
When you talk to the kids, your kids, what's the message that you give to them as far as now that you're the governor and the First Lady? What are you teaching them? What are you telling them? How are you navigating the next 4 years for them?
Well, I will tell you, I mean, they know that I am very competitive. And I work with them. Right now it's basketball season, so we spend a lot of time out in the yard shooting baskets. But I use sports as a metaphor for life. I tell them all the time that I believe that when I was growing up playing ball that I could compete with anyone anywhere in the world. I believe that they, if they work hard enough, can grow up and can compete with anyone anywhere in the world, whether it's from a basketball standpoint or a softball or a soccer or in academics. And I tell them a lot that that's really what I want to bring to the governor's office as well, is I want every kid in Mississippi to have a feeling that no matter what path they choose in life, whether it's sports or academics, that they can compete with anyone anywhere in the world if they're willing to work hard enough to get there. You know, and also I say to my kids pretty regularly that, you know, you can be the change agent. You know, if you got a kid in school that you know is struggling today, lift them up. You know, you're the we don't talk about it at home, but you're the governor's daughter, and if the governor's daughter says to you, hey, you know, it's all going to be all right. Is there anything I can do to help you? Anything I can do to fix you, make it better for you? I mean, that's what it's all about. I mean, that's what Mississippi is all about, is helping our friends and our neighbors become better people and get through tough challenges. And we all have tough challenges. It's true of everyone in this state. It's true of everyone in this country. Sometimes you just need somebody to say, hey, it's going to be all right. Let's work together to make it better.
When we come back, more of my conversation with the First Family, Tate Reeves' priorities, including prison reform. Now to my conversation with Governor Tate Reeves and First Lady Elee. I talked with the governor about two of the biggest issues facing the state, prison reform and health care. He talks about his priorities and also why he's unapologetic about his leadership style.
I made a decision 10 days ago that before I made any decisions, I wanted to visit the facilities. So I actually went to Walnut Grove, where there are no inmates right now. I toured it, I viewed it, I looked at it, I talked to Sheriff Wagner, who is the longtime sheriff of Leake County, someone who, by the way, did not support me in the Republican primary, but a super person who understands corrections, who understands law enforcement. He and I toured the facility along with Tommy Taylor, who is our interim director. And then the next morning, I went to Parchman. I went into the unit 29 bay where the disturbances took place. I went into multiple bays where there were actual current inmates in them. I toured Unit 32 as well. I toured Death Row and actually went into the bays where Death Row was. I wanted to get a feel for it myself. And I had toured Parchman before, many years ago, and seen it sort of from the outside looking in, but I wanted to go see it from the inside looking out. And I was convinced there that the current situation is not one that lends itself to long-term stability. And so while we have maintained order and we have a new commissioner who is making some very good decisions and implementing systemic change, we had to do something, and we got to do it as quickly and as justly as possible. And so the Unit 29 was built many, many years ago. It was never intended for the classification of inmates, some of whom are in there now. And so as we go and reclassify every inmate at the department, which is what we are undergoing now, it seemed to me to be the right decision to make for our system long term.
Advocates for prison reform praise your decision to close Unit 29, but say it needs to go further and shut the whole prison down. Is that something that is on the table?
Well, I would tell you, what I've tried to be clear about, Byron, is that we haven't ruled anything out. But I'll also tell you that I met with a large group of very concerned legislators from Sunflower and Bolivar counties today, and they're very, very concerned about the potential of completely shutting Parchman down. The reality is, we've got to get inmates into an environment where it is a safe environment, an environment in which they are protected. But I'll also tell you, Byron, many of the structural damage and structural challenges that we face at Parchman are not because of neglect by the state. They're because of actions taken by the inmates. And so, I think that we're going to continue to look at what our options are. We're not going to rule anything out, but we do think closing Unit 29 is a very good first step.
During your State of the State, you said no Medicaid expansion. Those were talking about doing something to deal with rural hospitals. What would your plan be to deal with those rural hospitals?
Well, I will tell you, we've got to continue to work with the members of the legislature to get resources to our rural hospitals. I also said in the State of the State that I think we can invest in rural hospitals, and I think we should invest in rural hospitals. I just think the expansion of a big government program is the wrong way to go. And I think that's the lesson of Obamacare, is that big government typically causes more problems than it solves. And so I think we've got to look towards, when we look at rural access and affordability of care, one of the things that we must do is we've got to get more physicians in rural areas. It's the reason that we've already invested in a new medical school, which has allowed our overall class to go from 100 medical students to up to 150 now. They're already in the new building. In addition to that, I think we should double our rural physician scholarship program to incentivize more doctors to move back to rural areas. I believe strongly that the best way for us to get a primary care physician in Ruralville, Mississippi, is to have a Ruralville, Mississippi resident and native come to medical school and decide to go back home. Because that's what Mississippians tend to do. If they're going to move back to the region of the state that they grew up in, they're going to move back very near their home, because we are a very family-oriented environment. In addition to more rural physician scholarships, I also believe we need more residencies in places not named Jackson. I think we need more residencies in the rural areas, in hospitals like Corinth and Tupelo and Greenville and Hattiesburg and the coast, and other areas as well. And so we're looking to invest in those hospitals, creating more residency programs. In the long term, Byron, residency programs tend to be funded by the federal government, but there's a pretty significant initial startup cost. And so I want the state to be willing to pay those initial startup costs for those hospitals to create those rural residency programs. That's going to help us keep more doctors in our state. And also, I'll tell you, we really need more telemedicine. Telemedicine is something that Mississippi has excelled at over the years. We need to invest more in technology, and we need to ensure that there are telemedicine solutions in rural areas, and that will help improve both affordability and accessibility of care. When I talk about healthcare, Byron, you won't hear me talk a lot about the institutions, although we certainly want to invest in rural hospitals. I'm more interested in the patients, and I'm more interested in what's best for the patients to ensure that they have affordability of care and they have accessibility of care, because that's who I work for, the patients, my constituents, ultimately the taxpayers of Mississippi. I have very strong views on the best way in which to move Mississippi forward. I'm a true conservative, and I believe that conservative reforms can make a difference in people's lives. But I hope that we can all come from the fact that I certainly recognize that those who are on the other side of the aisle from me, while we don't often agree on the way in which to get from point A to point B, I do believe that they're well-intentioned in trying to get from point A to point B. And so that's something that we're going to work hard with all of our friends in the legislature. Let's put our conflict aside, recognize that we're not going to agree on everything, and we're not supposed to. If we're going to agree on everything, you know, if Elee and I agreed on everything, we wouldn't have to both be here. If the House and the Senate agreed on everything, then we wouldn't need two different bodies within the legislature. If the executive branch and the legislative branch agreed on everything, we wouldn't need both. And so we're going to have discussion and whatnot, but I just hope we do it in such a way where we recognize that everyone is doing what they're doing because they're well-intentioned and they want to do what's best for Mississippi.
Tell me, how did you all meet?
We met in college. We both majored in, well, he majored in economics and I majored in business, but we were both taking a financial management class, and Tate showed me how to use the financial calculator, so we laughed. We have a very nerdy romance. But
we may be the only couple in the entire country whose romance started with a financial calculator, right?
yeah, but we both worked at a bank together right out of college, and then married shortly thereafter. And we've been here since then.
So who's the best with finances?
Me.
She is, of course.
I still do it.
There's no question she's the smarter one.
What's the message that you all would like to give to Mississippians? Elee?
Well, I think for me, just being from a small town, I'm from Tylertown, you know, just how honored I am to be Mississippi's newest First Lady, and that, you know, we love Mississippi. We've both decided to stay here and raise our kids, and I just hope that we can have a really great impact on Mississippi.
When we were graduated from college, both had opportunities to work here. We both had opportunities to go out of state. Now, admittedly, she probably had a lot more opportunities to go out of state than I did because people like her more than they like me. But we had opportunities to go out of state. But we made a decision early on in our marriage that we're going to stay here. We're going to stay here, and we're going to get Mississippi jobs, and we're going to live in a small town in Mississippi, and we're going to raise Mississippi kids. And so what I would say to the people of Mississippi is that let's all work together to make our community and our state a better place. We've got an enormous opportunity here. We can come together and we can put in that Mississippi pride, and we can say we're going to work together. We love each other enough that we're going to work together even when we disagree to make Mississippi even better. I'm committed to do that, and I believe in my heart that the vast majority of Mississippians are committed to do that as well.
Thanks to Tate and Elee Reeves for their time, and we'll be right back. Coming up on Monday, the first battle in the race for president, the Iowa caucus. Our political expert, Dr. Nathan Schrader, tells us what we can expect.
On the Democratic side, we still have there's just a handful of candidates left out of the 25 or so that we started out with in the summer who could plausibly win the Democratic nomination. And so an important point to consider with regards to those first states, you've got the caucuses in Iowa, then you shift to a primary in New Hampshire, then a primary in South Carolina, and a caucus in Nevada. So the first four states that get the vote in this race they're very diverse geographically, demographically, and ideologically. So you're going to see the Iowa vote. It may sway some voters in other places because if one candidate performs very poorly in that contest, it may make other folks in other states say, well, wait, maybe that was my candidate, but if they couldn't deliver in the first state or the first few states, maybe I've got to start thinking about somebody else. As of right now, the polling in Iowa has been bouncing back and forth between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. There was a poll that came out today that showed Joe Biden has reclaimed the lead in Iowa over Bernie Sanders. But I think the most important thing for your viewers to note is that it doesn't matter necessarily who wins, other than that's a headline, right? Because a candidate needs to achieve a decent showing in order to accumulate delegates. And the way the nominees are selected in the end is how many delegates do you accumulate. And the Republican Party uses a winner-take-all system. The Democrats use a proportional system. So you will see some candidates, even if they finish second, third, or maybe fourth, as long as they hit 15 to 20% of the vote, they're going to come out of Iowa with delegates in their pocket. Let me say this, a very unique thing about Iowa. If Mississippi voters who vote in a traditional primary, as you know, the polls open at 7 p.m. or 7 a.m. and they close at 7 p.m. So in the way the Iowa caucuses work is so different. You don't show up to do your caucusing until 7 o'clock at night. There's no voting all day long. You have to show up at your designated caucus area, which could be a local high school, a gymnasium, a church hall, and there are over 1,500 of these caucus sites in the state. And it's not a traditional vote. You have got to be there and in line at 7 or you can't participate. So it is also, I'm not a big fan of the caucus system because it's limiting. So folks who work, folks who have to take the kids to practice, it's not very voter friendly. So that I think does have an impact on who shows up and who gets to participate.
Thanks to the Governor and First Lady and Dr. Nathan Schrader, and for you for watching. Be sure to join us next Saturday night. Until then, make it a good night.